communist current, and we perceive ourselves as being a Marxist organisation, a communist organisation. The question on the national question, the issue of nationalism is of fundamental importance to the struggle of the working class. Nationalism today is the framework par excellence for the operation of capitalism. And I just want to say first, having read the Anarchist Federation pamphlet, we were extremely, in WR, extremely impressed with the pamphlet, with the positions, particularly with the opposition to all forms of nationalism, and we want to salute the pamphlet. We think that there are certain weaknesses in the pamphlet, and one of them is a lack of, if you like, of historical perspective, although it obviously does contain the history of nationalism, but it doesn't really situate the attitude of revolutionaries, militants to the national question in an historical context, and we think that's one of the weaknesses of the pamphlet. But apart from that, we feel that it's an extremely good pamphlet. As the introduction to the pamphlet says, Against Nationalism, it poses this question: what is a nation? And I want to just make a quote now. The usual answer steps forward out of common sense. A people share a culture, history, an origin, a community, a set of values, and usually a language which makes them a nation. People within the nation share a commonality with one another, which they lack with foreigners. From this point of view, the world is made up of such nations. It always has been and always will be. But the ideology of nationalism, regardless of which nation we are discussing, is a political one, describing the relationship between the people and the state. The nation-state is seen as an outgrowth of the natural community, its means of conducting its business, and the instruments of its collective will and well-being. At the very least, a one-on-one correspondence between nation and state is seen as the usual, natural, and desirable state of affairs, with any international cooperation, business and organisation progressing from this starting point. And this is correct. This is fundamentally the framework in which the bourgeoisie, and today the international bourgeoisie, operates. And obviously in the past there were nations before France and England, etc., etc. But it's within capitalism where we can actually see this formation of the nation-state. Indeed, as the AF introduction proposed, this rhetoric is assumed even in states which do not bother to claim legitimacy through representative democracy, or nationhood. Indeed, the formation of the nation-state was a fundamental prerequisite for the development of capitalism. Really, really important. The revolutions of 1848, for example, formed the nations like Germany, etc., and which were fundamental for the development of capitalism. Today, as communists, we condemn any support for nationalism as being fundamentally reactionary, a support which delivers the struggle of the working class into the hands of imperialist war and national impotence. Nationalism takes as its first principle the defence of the nation, and the proletariat's first principle is, the standpoint of the proletariat is that they have no homeland, only their struggle as a class and their solidarity, which is intrinsically internationalist. So even though, for instance, many workers might really perceive themselves as being Belgian or French or English, in reality, because they only have their wage labour, they are intrinsically internationalists. In the 20th century, Nationalism has delivered workers of many countries up to mass slaughter in the two world wars. In the so-called Third World Wars of national liberation, we see the bourgeoisie is forced to strengthen the stranglehold of its imperialist system. Imperialism means precisely that the whole world is dominated, carved up by the main capitalist powers. Throughout the imperialist epoch of world capital, no new independent capitalisms can appear, nor can they appear. National liberation is simply impossible in this era, in this epoch. Every country, every fraction of capital is compelled to integrate itself into the military economic complex imposed by the main powers. Today that means fundamentally the American bloc. In the past it meant as well mostly the Russian bloc. So the wars of national independence, national liberation struggles, we saw that the Russian bloc essentially supporting these countries. Every war, every shift in international alignments means only that the world market has been redivided, the spoils redistributed, and this has been the case throughout the 20th century. But it is particularly apparent in periods of open crisis. In such periods, the imperialist blocs, and I'm talking about before 1989 now, must reinforce their internal cohesion. They must bring all of their vassal states to heel and intervene in any area threatened by the incursion of the other bloc. They can no longer afford to allow the rival bloc the slightest margin of manoeuvre in any corner of the globe. This grim reality of the two blocs strengthening themselves in preparation for a final showdown underlies all the significant events which have so dented the image of nationalist struggles over the past years. So I'll just go over some of them, which I think are important. Particularly important are the struggles after the Second World War. And we take one of the main examples, which is China, the alleged beacon of the oppressed people of the world, openly and shamelessly integrated itself into the US bloc. It followed a foreign policy so reactionary that the world of Maoism was thrown absolutely into a turmoil. In 1970, Mao welcomed Nixon to Peking, while the US bombs rained down on China's socialist allies in Hanoi. In 1971, China combined with the US, Britain, Ceylon, India, Pakistan and Russia to put down the uprising in Ceylon led by the People's Liberation Army, JVP. In the same year, it supported Pakistan's Yahya Khan in his efforts to crush the movement for Bangladeshi independence. It established friendly relations with the ultra-reactionary regimes in Chile and also as well apartheid South Africa. It sided with the South African-backed FLNA in the Angolan War of 1976. In 1979, it invaded its Stalinist neighbours in Vietnam. All of this is accompanied by squalid faction fights within the ruling clique in China, by sudden and bewildering changes in the bureaucracy's ideological lines in order to kick out the more autarkic Gang of Four and install the pro-Western Tame faction. Today, the whole myth of China has been completely and utterly smashed. We can see that China is really recognized as a capitalist country like the US or like Britain or France, for example. And another example, in Angola in 1976, three rival national liberation fronts fought on this murderous war to decide who will become the true authentic spokesman of the Angolan masses. These internal rivalries no longer even veiled the global rivalry which feeds